I didn't tell Matt is that I never ever rehearse my talks. I never ever go through and do a dry run.
All the time.
My challenge is I stop having coffee at lunch to try and control my caffeine intake.
Cool.
We'll
get started because we are nearly 5 past now. Thank you everyone for joining us this evening. We do appreciate you giving up your time tonight to be here with us. This is the virtual youth group. So this is a dedicated virtual youth group. If you've never been here before, we do sessions once every few months, completely virtually. So if you'd like to present at one of our youth groups, please let me know. Otherwise, if you want to stick around just for the ride and to learn from our experts, you're more than welcome to do so. The virtual youth group is presented by myself, Mike, who's on the call, and Ryan and Trisha. We are all big advocates for the Microsoft community, and we run this thing in our free time. So, your mileage may vary with some of the answers you might get out of me. It's all good. Cool. I just ask everyone to pop on mute when you join. That'd be great. So our agenda for tonight. This is your world-class introduction by me. We first up we have Mike Hartley doing a condensed version of an A to Z on accessibility. Condensed because, again, I reminded Mike that 26 letters in the alphabet, 45 minutes, roughly 2 minutes per letter. And then
you're really not worrying about that fact, are you?
No, not at all. Not at all. And we need time for questions as well. So Mike's a world-class presenter. He's professional. He always does dry runs of his presentations and never overruns. So we've got him up first. We're going to have a short break. It'll be around 10 minutes, depending on maybe how much Mike might run over. But around 10 minutes, give people a chance to grab a drink and nip to the loo and come back. And then we'll carry on with our second mic of the evening, Mike Gowland. Thank our sponsors. We have sponsorship at a UK level. So we have loads of user groups around the UK. If you don't know anything about us, we have user groups in Manchester, in Bristol, Cambridge, Birmingham, London, you name it, we've got user groups there. There's one in the northeast as well. And we can't put on any of these events unless it is for our sponsors. So a big shout out to Click Dimensions, Develop, Infinity Group, DCN, Experian, Resco, Magic Global, and Digiplex. DPUG, because without these sponsorships, we couldn't run all those other events, and they do help us with some of the funding for our virtual events as well. So big shout out to them. Really appreciate all their support and support of the Microsoft community. Now, I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to let a real expert talk. So Mike, I'm giving you an extra 7 minutes there.
Oh, you are kind, you are kind, right. And intro. The agenda. A completing geek. I'm an A. Behind me, which also kind of show my geek. Scan that QR code that's on the screen. As well. And I will see, I'm known as part of the Midlands. Have a look at without the colours, just the regular person icon. That's Power Platform and Microsoft 365 colours. What's done with that? And there are visual difficulties and restrictions that crop up. You've got your auditory, people who can't hear or have difficulty hearing. It could be anything from people with tinnitus to complete deafness, either acquired over the years or been born with it. You've got your verbal, so your speech difficulties or even inability to talk. Cognitive, I think that one's kind of self-explanatory. And then mental health is a disability. That one's funny because I always had 5 disabilities, and I've talked about mental health for years now. I've talked about accessibility for years now, and I attended the Microsoft Ability Summit virtually during COVID, I think it was, or the year after. And they mentioned that mental health was a disability. And I'm like, is it? I never knew. And all of a sudden, my 2 worlds collided. And it is. Mental health is a registered disability. And when I say that these things aren't always obvious, they're not, because I have disabilities. I have mental health issues, quite complex mental health issues. I'm very vocal and open about sharing them. I have physical. I've got a degenerative spinal condition. I have chronic pain that I live with every day of my life. I'm on a lot of medication, and it's only going to get worse. But to look at me, people wouldn't necessarily know. They wouldn't necessarily see. So it's not always visible. It isn't always obvious. And when we look at the statistics of it, you kind of realize, well, yeah, it genuinely isn't always obvious, because here in the UK, 1 in 5 working age adults have a registered disability. The key there is the word registered. I'm not registered disabled. I haven't got a blue badge. I haven't gone through that process. Part of it's a stigma. There's quite a strong stigma attached to it. Part of it is just not getting on and doing it, and part of it is the fact that it's actually kind of difficult to go through the process sometimes. It's not made easy. But when you think that 1 in 5 people have a registered disability, you think, well, that is a lot of people. Quite a few of the people I'm working with will have registered disabilities, and I may not know about it. Globally, there are 1.4 billion people roughly registered as disabled, and that doesn't include the countries that don't release numbers. And we can kind of think of the countries that don't like to let that information out. 70% of disabilities are hidden. Now, that might be like myself, where you can't see the disabilities, or it might be a case of people who mask their disabilities. They hide them because they don't want people to know. They've lived with either the stigma or the challenges or the restrictions and the being held back in employment and things like that because of their disability. So they hide them. And then you kind of put that alongside the 20%, and you start to realize that this is a much bigger scale thing. And 1 in 4 people will experience mental health issues. During COVID, it is estimated that 50% of people experience mental health issues, and we can all understand why, really, with lockdown, uncertainty, some of the fear that was going round. For a lot of people, those mental health things will be temporary. It may last a month, it may last a few months, it might last a year or 2, but then they'll ease out of it. For others, like myself, it's a permanent issue. I had a breakdown in 2007. Here I am nearly 17 years later, and things ain't getting any easier for me. So it's a complex situation. It is, with disability. So that then leads us on to what is accessibility. And the definition of it is the ability to access and benefit from a system or entity. A load of words. Yeah. The picture, it shows the curb cut. It shows that dip in a curb that we're kind of used to when you're approaching a zebra crossing, that allows people in wheelchairs to get bump-free access down and then back up. That's accessibility at work. That's also called the curb cut effect, in that benefits not only people in wheelchairs, it benefits people elderly, people with broken legs who might be on crutches, it makes it easier for them. Parents pushing a pram or a pushchair, they don't have to bump up and down. Kids on bikes, things like that. Accessibility is about making it better and accessible for people who do have disabilities. But a lot of accessibility has a much wider impact. One stat is subtitles, closed captions on TV and what have you. 80% of users of subtitles do not have any hearing issues. 80% of people who use subtitles can hear perfectly well. But they are proven to help with knowledge retention, with helping focus on the screen. They can help people with dyslexia. One of my children has dyslexia, and they have really conquered their dyslexia because they watch a lot of anime and they do not watch it dubbed into English. They watch it in the original language, be it Japanese, be it Korean, anything like that, and they read the subtitles. I saw them the other day and they were reading a book on their computer and they were using text to speech to help them. So that was kind of the flip on the subtitles. They were using text to speech to help them, but they were reading along to the words and they were reading it and they boosted the speed. So there's a lot of benefits to these things. So let's crack on to the A to Z. And not only am I going to be skipping some letters for time, I am also going to be doing it not in alphabetical order, mainly because I've tried to group this together into some logical clusters of topics, and some letters can feature on slides together. So because we're in IT, I'm going to start with looking at tools, acronyms and standards, because of course in IT we have to have acronyms. I mean, where would we be without acronyms? So the first acronym, and this is the daddy of them all for accessibility on the digital stage that we live on. It's WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These have come from the World Wide Web Consortium, who kind of dictate all the standards for web design and how the internet works in many ways, or certainly the World Wide Web part of the internet. They've created these guidelines for building accessible websites and apps. Oh, my animations are in the wrong order. Part of these guidelines includes ARIA, your second acronym of the night, which is Accessible Rich Internet Applications, and that's why we've got the opera singer there. This is a subset of the WCAG guidelines, and it talks about how to build accessible applications. These standards are so well written and well thought out that they've been adopted by wider digital organizations. If you use Accessibility Checker in Office 365, which after tonight I hope everybody will do, a lot of the rules that are applied with Accessibility Checker in Office are based on the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. If you use Solution Checker on your Power Apps, that now includes accessibility being checked, and that checks against WCAG and a lot of the ARIA rules. The standard itself is evolving, it's growing, it's adapting, it changes. The latest version, 2.2, was released kind of mid last year. And that's because the technology moves on, but also our understanding of accessibility moves on. I'll say it multiple times, but accessibility is a journey, not a destination. There's no 100% accessibility. It's just not something you can achieve. But it's all about making it more and more accessible, more flexible, more options there for people to choose from and ways to engage and work with. And these guidelines are being adopted by governments across the world, including the UK government, including the European Union, in legal legislation that businesses and government bodies are obliged to comply with. I have a bit of an issue with this because the G stands for guidelines. It's not a hard and fast set of rules, and sometimes to make something accessible, you might need to sidestep a particular guideline, but then you're not fully compliant with the guidelines. But welcome to the world of accessibility, folks. It's fun. As I say, you're never going to make it 100% accessible. And then we have 3 more acronyms that really are the global ones that are kind of the big deals. You've got the Americans with Disabilities Act over in the US. That dictates a lot of accessibility mandates within digital content as well as overall life. Over here in the UK, one of the big ones is Government Design System. Any of us who have used any Gov UK service or website will have noticed they follow a very familiar template in the way that the buttons look. They might be different colors, but they're the same style. The headings are the same. The navigation is the same. The pages are the same. That's the Government Design System. Any government body that does anything publicly and in private or sort of internally, their digital content should comply with GDS. Then we have the European Accessibility Act, and this kicks in the next 18 months. Next 18 months, less than that now. And it dictates requirements around accessibility in the EU. And you might think, well, we're not part of the EU. Well, we're not. The thing is, our government will take that European Accessibility Act, do a search and replace European Union with United Kingdom, and then issue that as our version of the European Accessibility Act. It says that businesses over a certain amount of turnover have got to make sure that apps, services, websites, everything from ticket booking to ATMs and everything else has to be accessible. So there's a big move. There's a lot going on to make sure that the digital world, which, let's be honest, is kind of our whole world these days, has to be accessible. And it's a great thing. I'm all for it. So that's your acronyms to begin with. Let's look at some kind of the tooling that people use. It goes by the name assistive technology, and it takes many, many forms. It can be physical, it can be software. Thing is, not everyone uses a mouse or a touch screen. I use a vertical mouse, not a horizontal mouse. If I use a horizontal mouse for too long, it radiates pain up my arm, into my shoulders, into my neck, and it causes me a lot of pain. So I use a vertical mouse because then it doesn't twist my arm bone, it doesn't twist the muscles. I'm fortunate and I can still use a mouse. Some people use keyboard navigation. Old school for the win here, but we are the keyboard cowboys. If anybody knows that quote, then you get bonus points. But some people use keyboard for navigation. Some people use eye tracking or even mouth navigation using the straws and things like that. There are lots of ways. Some people use adapted controllers. There's the Xbox adaptive controller, which is a fantastic piece of kit. Other kind of common technology, that's the physical. Well, there's also software, and common ones are screen magnifiers and screen readers. So Windows Narrator, and you've got your magnifier. You may have noticed that I, by default, have subtitles switched on when I'm doing PowerPoint presentations, because that's tech that's built in. You've now got Windows Live Captions available, particularly if you're on Windows 11, that allows any audio on your PC, whether it comes with subtitles naturally or not, it will capture that audio and it will create subtitles for you. So all those podcasts, all those older films and TV shows that didn't have subtitles, Windows Live Captions to the rescue. Magnifiers, they're predominantly used by people with visual impairments, but I also know quite a few neurodivergent people who use them to help focus in on a specific area of their screen, a specific area of an app or function, so that it helps their focus and reduce the background noise. Screen readers are used again by a wide variety of people, not necessarily just those with visual disabilities. As I said, my son uses it to help with his dyslexia, and lots of other people do. People with autism and ADHD can quite often use screen readers to help them consume content. And honestly, I hear the speeds that some of these people have their screen reader set to, and it's like 300, 400% speed. And it's like listening to an old cassette tape. And yes, I am that old. When you've got play and fast forward pressed at the same time, it's like, and they get it all. It's just crazy. As I say, navigation, lots of different ways of navigating through using digital technology. Doesn't just have to be a laptop or a PC, tablets, mobile phones, other kinds of tech. That's why I keep referring to it as digital technology, not just computers. So, hello, my name is, and if you are finishing that quote off, you get an extra bonus point, especially if you got my first quote, because anybody who's a fan of The Princess Bride will automatically be finishing that quote off. But naming, what's that got to do with accessibility? What we call things matter. When we think about Power Platform development, think about Power Apps, think about Dataverse, think about anything we do with cascading style sheets or bookmarks, things like that. Naming matters. It matters to developers. Clear and consistent naming helps developers. It helps, I mean, anybody who's picked up somebody else's piece of code and had to deal with that will know that naming matters. But users of screen readers often need that naming to navigate, because a screen reader, if there's no clear text on an object or whatever, it will tell you button OK. And if it's just called button 1, button 1, well, what does button 1 do? Doesn't tell me anything. So screen readers read those names quite often. And we also have to think, it's not just end users here. We're thinking about, what about developers who use screen readers? What about developers who use assistive technology? They need those names to be able to help them to build and develop apps and solutions. So it's not just end users we're looking at here. Naming helps provide structure. It also helps in our most beloved of all jobs, documentation. There are automation tools out there that help, and if you've got good naming, you get good documentation, support, debugging, and all that. So you see this as an area that actually has multiple benefits. It's not just accessibility, it is all round for good way of working and good way of operating. Which then brings us on to standards, because having a consistent way of naming, having a consistent way of developing makes life a whole lot easier for developers. As I say, developers using assistive tech, if they pick up an app by me and I've built it to the same standard as an app built by Matt, then it makes it easy for them to pick up. It makes it easy for anybody to pick up, not just those with assistive technology needs. And yeah, we all love standards because we love it when other people comply with them, because it makes our lives easier. And we hate them because we just kind of think, oh, I can't be bothered with this. But once we get in the habits, we don't even realize we're doing it, and it makes things a lot smoother. And there are 3 standards that are kind of floating around, or guidelines. The first one is by our very own Mr. Collins Jones here. It's the Artemis framework for Power Automate. And it's all about coding and making and building Power Automate flows. He's just released version 2, and yeah, you need to check it out. It's well worth it. We've then got the Pumpkin framework for Power Apps. It's not been updated for a couple of years, but it is still really solid and contains a lot of nuggets of gold in there and some real good jumping off points for building standards. And then again, this one's not been updated for a while, which I think is the bigger crime as it is Microsoft. You can tell the age of it because there's no space in the Power Apps. That is the genuine age of this thing. It predates the space. But they have some Canvas app coding standards and guidelines again, they still have value. They are still useful. So let's get on to some fun stuff. Designing and developing. And we're talking across the whole Power Platform in different ways. Some of it's Power Apps, some of it's Power BI, some of it's Power Pages, Power Virtual Agents, some of it's Dataverse. You can work out which bits apply where. So let's start with fonts and colours. Are you a dark moder or a light moder? Me, I live in the dark, mainly because if I'm blasted by the glare of white screens all day, I will get a migraine-like headache, and that's not pretty. So I live in the dark. However, I know some people with different accessibility needs who cannot cope with dark mode. Some people with visual difficulties find dark mode is the godsend of all that is digital. I've got a good friend who's got visual difficulties, and dark mode to them just makes everything swim, and they cannot read in dark mode. It has to be light mode. So colours and colour modes matter. There's not just dark and light, there's high contrast, low contrast, negative, black and white. There's lots of different colour modes that you can find in Windows and operating systems, and they matter. Dyslexia, quite often you'll find that people with dyslexia may have coloured tinted glasses or have coloured sheets over their monitors, because there'll be certain colour filters that help them read. People with visual impairments, as I say, different needs there. People with ADHD, autism, that kind of thing, certain colours will be more calming and will help them engage. Other colours will just cause too much noise and mayhem. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and that's going to be the last time I say that by its full name, provides really good guidance around colours. There are tools out there that will help you work out colour contrast ratios to make sure that your text is visible against your background, and that you're really making sure that content is visible for everybody. And there are different ways that you can do this in Power Apps. You've got the Creators Kit that was released the other year. It's a suite of components, a library, and it incorporates a theme generator and some really good stuff in there. It's nice and easy. You drag and drop it, you build it, boom, away you go. You apply some variables and it's all good. There's a legend in the community, Sancho Harker, who came up with the original way of theming Canvas apps. He's got a theme builder that involves manipulating some of the code behind your Canvas app, but is phenomenal and really works with design mode and everything else as well. There's some weird guy, Mike Hartley, I think his name is. He's built a data-driven approach to theming. So what I've done is created a way of hooking into either Dataverse, which is my preferred choice. You could use SharePoint lists if you wanted. It'd be a fair use. You could even use an Excel sheet, and you can build color themes that people can click and changes the color scheme of your apps just in a simple drop down. Reason I went data driven is because we all know that companies like to change branding and identities. This would allow you to roll out a complete color change to your apps overnight in one fell swoop. So there's lots of different ways. We're also getting the modern controls in Canvas apps. These are fluent UI controls. They do incorporate some theming that is going to be expanded upon probably. There are limitations to all of the methods I've just mentioned, including mine, but go use mine. But there are lots of different ways that you can do color theming and switching that allow you to build into your apps dark mode, light mode, high contrast, low contrast, just really make it quite entertaining as well. You can have a Tron themed mode if you wanted to give it all the black and fluorescent blue kind of color schemes. That'd be one I'd go for. And we also need to consider this for Power Pages, cascading style sheets that allow you to switch your color theme. Power BI is a big one. We need to consider how we use colors in our reports and dashboards. And basically everywhere, PowerPoint, Word, Excel, everywhere we create content. And we also have to consider the fonts, the typefaces that we use. Microsoft have just rolled out, some people love it, some people hate it, but hey, that's always the way with change. Microsoft have just rolled out a new default font called Aptos to replace Calibri. The reason they've done that is Aptos is far better for people with dyslexia to read. It's a much crisper, much more visible font. I'm actually using it on some of the slides here, not all of them, because I didn't get time to go through and apply it on all of them. Bad me. But we need to think about the fonts we use. Using a sort of handwritten or a cursive font when it's 12-point text benefits nobody. Using a cursive font when it's a nice huge banner, great, go for it, or a brush font or whatever. We just need to think about, well, are the fonts legible? Can people easily read them? Because if people can't read them, you're not getting your message across and you're defeating yourself. Pictures. Everybody say cheese. A picture paints 1,000 words. There's a lot of argument over who came up with that quote. Napoleon seems to be the favourite. But it's true. A picture does paint 1,000 words. And when we're creating content, we balance our words with pictures. Nobody wants to just read a instruction manual that is just words. They want pictures, but likewise, they don't just want pictures. They need words to explain it. Balance. But if you're using a screen reader can't read an image. It can read words, it can't read an image. So that Lego man painting a picture, the screen reader doesn't know what that is. It just knows there's an image there. Except there's this thing called alt text, alternative text. It's been around quite a while. It allows you to describe the image in a concise way. I mean, you can put in a huge amount of text, but you really shouldn't, because screen reader users will hate you if you do. So in this case, I think I've put text in there that says something like a Lego man painting a picture. It describes what the image is without going into too much words. Doesn't distract from the information. because you need to consider the narrative. You need to consider the story that you're telling and consider how it will sound when a screen reader hits it. And some images are purely decorative. They serve no function other than to make things look pretty. The yellow line under everybody say cheese, that's a line drawn in PowerPoint, but it counts as a picture in PowerPoint. I don't need to say to the screen reader, this is a yellow line, because it serves no purpose. So I can mark that, and I have done, as decorative. But don't use that as an excuse to be lazy, because there are images that need to be explained for screen reader users. It's a balance. So, talking balance, we need to think about how we design our apps. And I do appreciate I am whizzing through. I'm trying to get through as quick as I can. Matt, I am doing my best. I hope you appreciate this. We need to consider that size matters, but content is king. We all use different screens. We all use different devices. I've got in front of me two 32-inch curved monitors. I'm just lucky I got them from a friend. Other people might be on a 10-inch tablet, or they might be on a 6-inch smartphone. Some people are on ultra wide, some people are on landscape, portrait. It's not just a straightforward world. Because when you resize the screen, your content will reflow, it will move around. And we need to make sure that that content can still be seen. Not just does it move in a logical way so that things flow naturally if I look at it on a phone instead of a computer, but also does my text box allow auto sizing so that you can see all the text that's in there, or a label on a field or something? Does it resize so that you can read what it says, or does it get cut short? I hate that when that happens. I really hate it when I go to websites on my phone and things are clipped because it's just badly designed. If we're using Power Apps, we've got layout containers. If we're using other things, I mean, Power Apps have them as well. We can use groups that allow us to ensure that our content stays grouped together in logical groupings so that when it does reflow, all the relevant bits stay together. And the use of all this means that people using keyboard to navigate, and there is a surprising number who do, they can navigate your content in a logical way. It flows in a logical manner and it works. So, and I realise the irony of me putting a slide in that says too much information because I'm doing a brain dump. The KISS principle, keep it simple. I've been accused of using 1,000 words when 10 will do, as you probably are all thinking, yes, we can believe that. We don't always need to. We need to highlight important information. This applies, incidentally, to anything we do, but think about your Power BI dashboards, your reports, think about your chatbots or your co-pilots. Sorry, I should say. Let's get that in my brain. Think about your co-pilots, making sure that the answers they give are concise, accurate, but to the point. Any supplementary information, any additional things that you need to know, put them on other pages so people can navigate to them. Put them on a different tab, provide links to additional content. But if you're doing a Power BI dashboard, you want the key information to be bam, 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 bam there, so people can see it straight away, rather than 1,000 different charts and data points visualized on one page, so that people are going, what? I've no idea what you're trying to tell me. And help. Used to be, and yes, I'm showing my age again, that you pressed F1 and you got help. Nowadays, you can still press F1 to get help, but more often than not, you'll get your help for your web browser, because we live in our browsers. That doesn't help me with a Power App. That doesn't help me with a Power BI dashboard that I'm viewing. So we need to find ways of providing help in an accessible format. It can be an additional page. It can be using accessible text properties on controls in Power Apps, tool tips, making sure that these things do get rendered in screen readers. Can have help panels and pages that slide out. Oh, there we go. There are different ways of providing help, but we want people to have that help so that they know how to make the most of the stuff that we're building. It's no good us building all these wonderful, functional, great apps with tons of great stuff in them if nobody knows it exists or knows how to use it. So, and I promise you, we're on the final stretch very, very quickly here. Where do we begin? What are the quick wins? So, validating the user's experience, user interface, user experience, the clues in the name there, users. We need to consider the user experience from lots of different perspectives. How do the things that we build react to different ways of navigating? Try using a keyboard. You might like it. In fact, I guarantee that pretty much everybody here will use their keyboard for keyboard shortcuts at point. Control-C, Control-V. Welcome to keyboard navigation. You're welcome. Tab to navigate around. Things like that. Test screen readers. There's Windows Narrator built in, as I say. There's another one that's NVDA. It's a free one. You can download it and you can try it. Different screen readers give different results. Phones have their own ones built in. There is another one called JAWS, but that's expensive. So unless you can get your company to sponsor you, that one is probably out of reach for most people, but that gives different results. Think about visual impairment, different color modes. You can actually simulate color modes by applying filters of your own in Windows. Consider information overload. Consider how people with ADHD, people with autism, people with other cognitive or visual challenges or perspectives see your information. Design what you build in coordination with the users of assistive technology. That is so important, as is getting accessible users to do testing and providing feedback. How do you do that? It's challenging and it can be difficult, but build an open environment. Invite people, let people know that you want to hear from them. Let them know that you want to involve them. Let them speak and listen. One of the kind of catchphrases, statements, placards, whatever, for accessibility and disability groups is nothing about us without us. Include people. 1 in 5 working age adults. Remember that number and you'll realise there are more people out there. You might not realise it. That person with earbuds in might not be listening to music, or they might also be listening to music, but they might be using a screen reader. So make an open environment. And then you, me, evolving. Progress over perfection. Nothing is going to be 100% accessible. It's about making progress. It's about taking that first step. It's about starting your journey. It's never going to be 100% accessible because one size does not fit all. One size fits one. What works for one person will not work for another and could make it worse. It's about working with your user base. It's about working on different ways of doing anything. And at the end of the day, the accessible community, the disability community, needs every single person on this call. It needs every single person building stuff, because we're all the developers, we're all the builders, we're all the report designers and everything else. We need to be building accessible content. So very quickly, some quick wins, and I promise you this is me drawing to a close. How do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. So, simple starting point. Think about the colours that you use. Look for WCAG contrast checkers. There are websites out there. There's apps that you can use that allow you to use an colour picker on your screen to test colours. Use alt text everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Social media, websites, Word docs, PowerPoint, anywhere that you put an image, use alt text. Please, it's a quick win. You'll get in the habit of it. Reduce the noise. Think about the information that you're portraying or you're presenting and think, is it all necessary? And make use of Accessibility Checker in Office, in Solution Checker and Power Platform, and really go for it. And find and include people who use assistive technology. Please create yourselves communities. Find networks if you work at larger organizations where there are often disability networks, neurodiversity networks, mental health networks. Connect with them, include them, invite them in. So that's me. I'd like to say thank you very much to every single one of you for being here this evening and listening to me blast through PowerPoint slides. I hate death by PowerPoint, so I do apologise. But I really hope you found it useful. You can scan that QR code, find my blogs, resources, connect with me on LinkedIn. There's my links there as well. But that is me. So I don't know how we're doing for time. Matt, do we have time for any questions, or are there any questions?
So we're just take the break now for 10 minutes till 10 past. If you'd like to ask Mike any questions, you can ask him now. If you want to go for a quick break, you can do, and I'll get John and the other Mike on at 10 past. So are there any questions for Mike?
Silence is golden.
You might be all right. Okay, we will just go into the break then. So if anyone would like to go for a break right now, feel free to head off to refill your drink and everything else. We'll start back at 10 past 7. 7 for the other Mike and John on LLMs and how they can be leveraged by consultants. So yeah, you can feel free to stay in the meeting, drop off the meeting fast. Stunned silence, Mike.
I know.
You must have
It's because they've all fallen asleep. They've all had their afternoon nap, courtesy of me now.
Yeah, session was so good that you answered all the questions in the presentation. So.
It was really good, Mike. I always learn something new
bud.
after like every session you do. There's always something slightly different that I don't know about, so that's good.
Oh, cool. Thanks, bud.
I always laugh about like accessibility terms when they talk about acronyms, because I'm here like a lot of people have issues with acronyms because A, you don't know what they mean, and two, like A, you don't know what they mean, and two, yeah, until I'm having a great day with numbers and letters today, and part I they're often, the letters are kind of usually kind of similar to your WCAG and you know ARIA and things like that, and it's like, how are you expecting people with accessibility requirements to be able to, you know, remember some of these things and others to remember these things, and they need to make it simpler, I think.
Amen. Preach, brother, preach. Yeah, they do. It's kind of why I got the acronyms out the way right at the beginning, because it's just like, and I mean, there are loads more, which is, yeah, it's quite depressing in many ways, because as you say, acronyms themselves are not accessible. I think any of us that end up working with a new client and we onboard with the client and they start throwing all their own internal acronyms around, and you're just like, what? Sorry, somebody give me a glossary, quick. I have no idea what you're talking about.
and then we'd be like, "Welcome to the world of tomorrow." And show him like all this Lego that is just in the loft. Because we've got some massive sets. I have the original Death Star, like before they made the new one, because they were trying to discontinue it. So we bought it and didn't build it for 2 years. My wife's got like the Ninjago massive sets. I have like a Lego shelf down here, which my son does like to come in and play with, which I don't. I'm not really a massive fan of that. But we just have like just hundreds of pounds of Lego upstairs. I have Lego that I've not built. So I won the new Ecto one, so not the small Ecto one, which is right there. Wide house, and we're like, no, let's just pay for it, just get all boarded, and then we have loads of options, and we even have little raised things on the end so that if Lego falls off, it doesn't go into the insulation. Lego loft. Everyone should have a Lego loft.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a loft. But...
Have you spoken to Craig White about your Lego loft?
I have not, no.
You should definitely have a chat with Craig.
Yeah,
but you could charge admission to go to your Lego loft.
Yeah, you could.
Lego land.
You could.
Well, it might
charge Craig admission.
Yeah,
we might need to if we buy any more Lego. We'll just start into debt, I think. So, we did go to Legoland last year in Billund, and that was a load of fun. So I highly recommend that if you have kids or if you're just a big kid. All right, I think the sponsor videos have finished from Ryan. Mike and Johnny, you ready to go? I'll give you a small intro.
I think so.
Yeah, mate.
Cool. Over to John and Mike. They are revolutionizing consulting from the looks of it, unleashing the power of large language models to steal some thunder. Two excellent presenters, two people that are big in the Microsoft community, and this is definitely a hot topic. So I will hand it over to you guys. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Matt. Cheers. Thanks a lot, Mike, for your presentation. Like I said on the break, always learn something new from you whenever you present. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Again, thank you very much. You know, without them, we wouldn't be able to be here. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, so we are Jon Russel and Mike Gowland, brothers from different mothers. Crab Boy, do you want to speak?
Yeah, hi everyone. I've come to the mothership today, so I'm in the office till a little bit later. So yeah, if I sound a little bit echoey, I'm very sorry.
Have you had any crab today?
No crab. No.
Do you eat crab actually?
I do, yeah. I eat crab.
So you eat your own kind?
I do, yeah.
Right, okay, good. So yeah, what we're going to go through, we've done these introductions. We're going to talk about large language models. You know, that's kind of why we're here. A bit about prompting, a bit about hallucinations. We're going to talk about how we can extend the Power Platform with AI. Then we're going to talk about the evolution of Just Ask It, a bit of prompt orchestration, and then a demo of the solution. So yeah, large language model parameters. So back in 2019, we had GPT-2, which was trained on 1.5 billion. And then in 2020, GPT-3 came out with 176 billion parameters. And then GPT-4, 1.76 trillion parameters. And, you know, it's something that me and Mike discuss quite a lot. It is bigger, better. And starting to come to the conclusion that potentially it might not be. And just that statistic there is really crazy. So 1 day of global ChatGPT usage uses as much electricity as about 33,000 US households. So I think as we move into the more kind of sustainable area, talking about environment and all that kind of stuff, I think this is going to be something that's going to become more and more hot topic when it comes to AI and large language models.
And I think something that we've also agreed on there, John, is it's not about the size, it's how you use it. Indeed,
yes. So small language models are trained on not a lot of parameters. And if you remember Paul Daniels, that was one of his catchphrases. He got into a lot of trouble, actually. New Year's Eve, I think it was 1990, when he got shut in an Iron Maiden and everyone thought he'd died. And they had like loads of people call up. Anyway, never mind, that's another story. Microsoft actually released a model called Pi, I think it is, 1.5. Huh?
Five, isn't it? Is it 5?
Okay.
Like 5.
5, okay. 5pod, yeah. And that's been trained on 1.5 billion parameters. And then later on in the year, Phi 2 came out, 2.7 billion parameters. And there are some drawbacks with large language models. They are more energy hungry, they're difficult to run and build. But with Microsoft creating these smaller models, in benchmarking tests, actually, they've actually performed better than many similarly sized models. And these large language models really are only available to kind of those large companies that have enough funds to have the server space to build, store, and train them. So I think we're going to be moving into this area of more of a democratization of AI, where smaller models, smaller language models, are going to be possible to be built and easier to be able to be built. And over to Mike on the next slide.
So the way that large language models generally work is that when you send your prompt in or your request, it's the prompt's broken down into something called tokens. And what tokens are essentially a small part of a word, or they can be a word if it's a small word, but they're generally like a long word broken down into smaller chunks. And the reason for this, I could demonstrate with you, John. So, John, if I ask you to stand up, jump up and down 5 times, tap your head 3 times, say la 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 la, and sit down, stand up, and sit down again, and get that right.
Now?
Yeah, why not? We got the time.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So just to go to that point, John's already got that wrong, and John's got that wrong because I've overloaded him with information. I've given him this massive set of instructions, and he has to try and render all of that to try and get that sequence right. Whereas actually, if I say to John, can you stand up?
Yep.
Can you now sit down again?
Yep.
Can you stand up? You sit down?
Yes.
I can have a lot of fun with this. But what we're doing there is we're actually breaking down those instructions into simple steps that John can then iterate on and consume. So, John, if I ask you what you think you're going to do next, what's the most likely response?
I'll probably get out of my chair.
Yeah. So what's really good about tokenization is that because these the words are broken down into smaller chunks, is that John can actually start to predict what the next action is going to be. And that can be based on probability, which is what we get with the large language model. So we can see the example there from a OpenAI completion. We've got this sentence, "It's a beautiful day, let's go to there." And then we're going to ask the large language model to complete that sentence. And what it came up with was beach and enjoy there. And then I told it to stop because I'm a cheapskate. Now, that BE, that has the percentage. You can see the percentage there. That's the probability of that being the next token in that sentence. But there are other options available as well. So it could be park. I don't trust it because pub's not in there as well. I hope to go to the pub a little bit later, so that's why it's on the mind. And because of that, we can actually use a parameter, which if we go to the next slide, John, in OpenAI's case anyway, a parameter called temperature. And that's creative or deterministic our large language model is going to be. And when we talk about creativity and deterministic, what we're saying is that we have this token that's at high probability, and if we're running a deterministic model with a temperature of 0, it's likely to just take whatever the highest probability token is. So its output is going to be almost in a way somewhat predictable, although not completely predictable, because the pool of tokens is so big, and when you make your request, it's only taking a few samples of that data to iterate on. So it'll always take the highest probability token. But if we increase that temperature, let's say to 0.5, so temperature goes from 0 to 1, 0 being deterministic and 1 being creative. We go to like 0.5, that allows the large language model to actually say, you know what, I could take the top token, but I could also go down to like some of the lower probability tokens. And that's where it starts to become more creative in its output. And if we were to set that to 1, then it can go even further and right down to the bottom of that pool. So some of those tokens that are really low probability of being used next, it can start to use them. And what OpenAI have found, and Microsoft have found as well, is that 1 seems to be that sort of like upper limit that you want to go to in creativity. And I'm not going to do the demo here because we did the demo for the Baltic Power Platform user group a couple of weeks ago, and unfortunately, it decided to print the word penis when we set the temperature to 2. So I'm not going to do that again. But what you'll find is that the responses become very jarbled. It starts talking nonsense, and as Jon's alluded to before, it's like it's got a fever because it's got a high temperature. And if you've ever used Bing Search, I think it's called Copilot for Bing. I think the name changes almost on a weekly basis. You'll have a slider on there that says, do you want your responses to be balanced, accurate, or creative? And that is a toggle for temperature for the large language model that's running behind there. There's another parameter called nucleus or top P, which is very similar to temperature, but that actually uses that's better for getting more creative responses than deterministic. So you tend to use either temperature or top P in OpenAI's case. They strongly recommend you don't mix the two because you'll get some very, very unexpected results. But yeah, if you want to promote more creativity, you might consider using top P instead.
Nice.
So
yeah, really, when it comes to AI, and I imagine a lot of you have probably heard this term now. Prompting is the now and the future, the present and the future. So it's kind of a mind shift from traditional development practices. So one of the main reasons why we called this solution that we're going to show you Just Ask It was because I had a question to Mike about how we could transform the information coming back and format it in an HTML format. I was looking at like Power Automate and how to do that, and he just said, well, just ask it. So I added another rule to tell it to whatever it provided us, any response that it provided us would provide it in HTML format. So because also using OpenAI's models are really, really cheap, as you'll see in a moment when we do the demo. It's really important to kind of iterate through your prompts. You're really not going to probably get it right the first time, and it's very forgiving on the price side of things. And a bit of a course that I did on generative AI by a guy called Andrew Ng, who is from the Deep Learning AI Training Institute. He said that if a college graduate can understand the prompt, then you're probably pretty much there. If it can't, then just iterate on it. And what you'll see in the demo a little bit is that when we write these prompts, we are always making sure that there's a context, purpose, and a rule set that we're providing to the large language model. So for those of you who might have remembered WWF or WWE after it got its name changed because the pandas weren't happy, Triple H, all of your responses need to be helpful, harmless, and honest. So, the Microsoft Copilot, for example, does have this grounding. It's built in. It's ethical use of AI, etc. But we've gone, for our model, we've got these rules that specifically say, don't provide any harmful responses. Always tell the truth and always be helpful. Hence the Triple H. And as Mike talked about earlier on, ChatGPT, large language models can hallucinate. So by that we mean they can be confidently wrong. So it's always a good idea to check your responses. There is a slight chance that the response that you get from the large language model is not right. And one really big example of that made the news was when a lawyer was in a courtroom and they were citing all of these different cases. The judge realized that he was talking absolute rubbish, and ChatGPT had basically made up all of these cases. So yeah, if you're using large language models, you do need to always check your responses.
And just to go back to that as well, John, just everyone in the call now, raise your hand if you've ever taken some code from ChatGPT that it told you worked, but it didn't.
Yeah.
That was the key bit I should have added there.
So, we're getting to the stage now where we're able to extend the Power Platform with AI. So there are different areas, but I mean, we do a podcast, and there is one button functionality in there to transcribe the video. There's also some other bits, isn't there, Mike, inside the podcast software?
Yeah, so we use a product called Riverside to do our podcast episodes. Sprint Zero, please subscribe. And what that can do, as you can see from the screenshot there, is we can do things like generate a full episode. So it will go through and remove any awkward silences. It will try and listen out for when John's fidgeting in his chair and try and take that out as well. And that can actually, automate the editing process to some degree for us. And that is literally just a button press. We have some data there already, but we're not specifically telling it to do it in natural language. We are just pressing a button, and it actually just acts as a one button function that we can press. And you can see there as well, we've got magic clips, so we can have the large language model determine from the transcript that it auto generates for us, thank you very much, to see when there might be like key points in the episode that we want to maybe share out on social media to promote the episode. It can also do that as well. And again, it's a single button. We're not specifically providing information there to make it do that. It's just a button you press.
Yeah, nice. And you've probably seen parameterized prompts, a bit like Microsoft Designer. So Jack Robotham did a parameterized share. He shared a parameterized prompt from Microsoft Designer, where like I'm showing in the screenshot there, we've got the kind of different words that we would like the user to input, but keeping the kind of format as to how we kind of want it. And then obviously you've got interactive chatbots, querying data with natural language, as we have seen a lot of.
And just to say about the parameterized prompts as well, John, if we just go back a slide, that example there you can see of Microsoft Designer, you're actually exposing what the entire prompt is and letting people fill in the blanks, but it doesn't have to be that way. A really good example I've seen is that if you've got an e-commerce site and you're adding products in, rather than writing the description out yourself, you could actually just pass in some tags for the search criteria. You can add the product name and you can add some categories, and then that could be your parameterized prompt. So you've got a prompt in the background that's taking all that information that you're inputting, and then it's going to give you a generated product description that you could use. So that's like another way of looking at parameterized prompts. It doesn't have to be that like you see the prompt and you're filling in the blanks. It could be morphed into something else as well. So yeah, we are going to be showing you the Just Ask It solution. So we've been working on this probably from about the beginning of December or so. Is that right, John?
Yeah, something like that.
So in about, I feel like it was about the first week of December or so, we jumped on a video call with Chris Huntingford to show what Just Ask It is. And it was originally called an Epic AI solution, and it was very basic, but it was I mean, by today's standards, I guess it was very basic, but it was mine and John's first foray into experimenting with large language models and really seeing what they could do. We got into getting into AI after South Coast Summit last year, after Donald Sarkar's keynote speech. And we sort of saw the call to action there that we kind of came to the conclusion independently that we really need to get on board with AI and we really need to understand it. So that's really where the drive came from to start this. Me and John sort of did our own separate research on how we could use it, and we eventually came together, as John mentioned earlier, about the HTML formatting, and that's really where John had really started working on this solution, and we both sort of joined forces to see what we could do. And the way it worked is that we were running two prompts in a very static flow. We were given some context in as to what we wanted, which was an ERD Dataverse schema for a specific business industry use case, and then it would go off and do that. But that was all it could do. We obviously added all the ability for that Mermaid.js diagram to be rendered onto the model-driven app page, but generating ERDs was really like the limit of what it could do because of the way it was very much a static process. But it worked, and it helped us to understand like what works, what doesn't work, and it got us to really iterate on the prompts that we started out with. And then moving on from there, if we just go to the next slide, John. Next slide, please. We then got to the 4th of January, and is it going to play? We don't want it to play, John. Why did that not work for me last night when I was at the South Coast user group? So we did another demonstration of Just Ask It. This is very much the same demo that we did with Chris Huntingford before. However, at the end of this session, we started to explore the idea that actually, rather than having these specific prompts and doing this specific use case for this model-driven app, we could actually start to orchestrate prompts, right? So we have this methodology of talking to a large language model. So we ask a question, we get a response. We ask a question, get a response, rinse and repeat. And that helps to build up the context of what we're looking for. But actually, could we not just automate that process? So on the next slide, John, I think if you, because I'm not driving, I'm having to tell him what to do there. So we have this concept now of a parent prompt, and one parent prompt can have many child prompts. And these prompts are reusable, but they all contain a system message. So in OpenAI, you basically tell the large language model what it's going to be before the user even starts interacting with it. So you can tell the large language model, you're a helpful assistant. That's the default. But actually, we can say you are an expert in Dataverse ERD schema creations, and you are going to help the user create an ERD schema for this use case that the user is going to provide in their response to you. And we can do things like that with a system message. The user prompt is where we then action the large language model to do something. So that's where we can give the specific context of what we're wanting to generate. And as John mentioned, we also have rules and guardrails. We have some that are mandatory, the triple H factor. They have to go with every single request, but then we can also create specific ones to that prompt. So if we want to format in a Mermaid.js diagram schema, that's what we'll put as a rule. If we want it to like reduce the amount of fluff that it's in, so rather than it coming back saying, hey, yeah, I'm a really helpful assistant and I'm going to help you do this, here's how you do it, we could say, actually, don't do that. We just want the information. We just want that schema. We want that HTML table with whatever content we're looking for. And what we can also do with this as well, which you can't normally do with interacting with ChatGPT, is we can chop and change what model we use as we go through each of these prompts. So we can start off with GPT-4 to do something a little bit more creative, but then if we want to do like a diagram and just get the schema for a diagram, we sometimes find that using GPT 3.5 Turbo is better for that. It's also a bit cheaper as well. So we're not limited to one model for the entire we're not limited to one model for the entire conversation. We can actually chop and change what we use. And then we also, for each prompt, we can also specify those parameters, that temperature and frequency and presence penalty, and that will actually scrutinize the tokens that come back. So we don't want it to repeat itself in the response. We could actually say, well, no, try not to repeat yourself, and we can do that with frequency and presence penalty. So as I mentioned before, like your normal interaction with ChatGPT or any chatbot is a prompt response, and you're constantly having that conversation to get to the point or get like lots of information. Whereas what we're going to do is automate that process, and that's what we're going to show you in the demo now. So nice. Time that. Well done, Mike.
Yeah, you did. Okay, so hold on.
You can tell we've done this before.
Yeah, so this is the this is the model-driven app, obviously based on Dataverse. We've got a few tables on the left-hand side holding our requests, the different prompts that we've created, place to get our responses, feedbacks which we haven't sorted out yet, but that's something that's hopefully going to be coming, our rules, and then the relationship with those rules to the prompts. So in here we can click on new, and I wonder if maybe there's someone who wants to come off mute and maybe think of something that's domain specific. So actually, let me just step back a little bit and explain that. So the reason why we first came to this was there was a solution architect in our team who wanted me to run a Dataverse lab with a client. Something like over like 4 to 6 hours, kind of work out what that content's going to be, make sure that it's domain specific to that industry, to that client, and then provide that learning to them in a kind of lab format kind of thing. And so the bit that always takes me the most amount of time is thinking of the idea, and that can really be anything. Can be from like writing a blog post to trying to work out what I could do with Power Automate next. And
or
so
how to start a podcast.
Oh yeah, how to start a podcast. Nice one, on brand. So he asked me this question, and I was like, right, okay, well, he wanted to know how long it's going to take me. I was like, probably like maybe a day and a half to kind of think up the domain specific idea, then build the ERD, then build the Dataverse model, etc. But then that's when I kind of started getting into this and realized, oh, hold on a second, maybe there's something here that we can do. And so imagine you're on a call, maybe you're a pre-sales solution architect, or you are someone in sales that's trying to show off a little bit about what Dataverse can do. It could be a cold call. And you are speaking to a client where you have no knowledge of what their domain is about. And let's be honest, I've seen lots of different clients from lots of different domains come into the Power Platform and use it, from people who were wanting to monitor cow methane to people who wanted to count the number of puffins on an island in somewhere in the Outer Hebrides. I mean, it's very random because the Power Platform does lend itself to that. So what I'm trying to get to in a roundabout kind of way is maybe if someone could come off mute and maybe think of a domain specific example that we could put into Just Ask It, so that we can show you how that works. To give you an example, I've done things like with that example, that was for a water utility company. They wanted to know a domain specific Dataverse lab around site inspections. So I fed that this. I said, you are give me a solution, a Dataverse solution for a water utility company focusing on site inspections. But yeah, the more weirder, the more wonderful. And I'm going to pick someone if someone doesn't come off mute. So who's going to come off mute? Who's going to come off mute? No one's going to come off mute. So Parvez is going to come off mute. There he is. Hello, mate.
Hey guys, how's it going?
All right,
Yeah,
thanks.
good. How are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good to see you again.
Nice. Would you be able to give us an example or an idea?
Yeah, so let's do this. So Ramadan starts next week.
Okay.
Let's do an app to track my Ramadan fast.
Oh,
Is there any specifics that you want it to make sure that it does cover?
Yeah, whether I observe the fast or not, what time the fast started on each day during the month, what time it ended. I'm just making this up on the spot, by the way.
I don't know if John's frozen or not.
Looks like he has.
Yeah. There
Sorry,
we go.
my
No.
my
You're back, but you're cutting in and out.
prompt. Yeah, sorry, my internet has been awful. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to submit this request, and then while we wait for that, I'm going to hand you over to Mike. Do you want to share your screen, Mike? And I can show the
start
flow.
with your screen because I want to show the parent prompt first before we go into any Power Automate. So what you can see there is when John sent that request, he selected that generate baseline solution for a business parent prompt. And as we mentioned before, a parent prompt can have one or more child prompts. So what you can see there in that subgrid within this form are the different prompts that we're actually going to run in order. So the first one is going to get us domain specific information. It is pointing to industry, so I'm not sure how it's going to react to well, it's probably, I would say, more of like an app used by a person rather than a solution for a business, but we'll see what happens. We then generate the ERD. We do the ERD creation, which is really mapping out the schema, what the relationships are in the columns. And then we actually do that Mermaid JS diagram creation after that. So what we're doing as we iterate through these prompts is we're retaining the conversation and feeding that back into the large language model. But what we can do with each of these prompts, as we mentioned before, is we can change the model as and when we need to. And we'll go through each of these prompts one by one. If I just make sure I've got the right screen up before I do a screen share. So what happens from a Power Automate perspective is we begin by John sends a request in and the flow picks that up. We have a little flag on that table that says, has it been submitted? Yes, if so, we're going to start processing it. And we get that parent prompt, list the child prompts out, and then we actually do an apply to each. And something that's probably a little bit more unusual here than what you'd normally find with an apply to each in Power Automate is that we actually force the concurrency to 1. And the reason we do that is that we actually want these prompts to run one at a time. And after that prompt's completed, we want to retain the conversation and reuse it as we go along. So what we do for each of those prompts, we get what the model is, we get the prompt type. So we're possibly looking to expand out, just ask it with additional functionality. And one of those, namely, is to do search. So you can search the internet for content and actually bring it into your workflow. So you could summarize like articles about a particular company and try and find out where the pain points are in that particular business or that industry. We then also get the rules as well. So as we mentioned, we have mandatory and prompt specific rules, but we actually concatenate those down, and we actually do a summarization as well. So what we want to do is, because tokens cost money, we want to try and condense that down as much as possible. And to do that, and for all the calls that we do to a large language model, we actually use a child flow to do that. So we're not repeating API calls within the flow. We're essentially just using a separate flow to do all that, and that also does our cost calculation as well. So we have a table with the different models, and we also associate the token cost with each of those models as well. So that will help us do that calculation that you'll see at the end. When we get down to it, though, we actually then make the prompt request, and you can see here that our system prompt actually contains the purpose, the context, and the rules. And we format it this way because this is actually recommended by OpenAI, that you break down these different properties by just putting in 3 hashes, which I think is quite common with Markdown as well. We then submit the user prompt. So the user prompt is a combination of what John's put in the request, and then literally just saying, hey, do what you've been asked to do, because we've given all of that within the system prompt here. And then we also put in those temperatures, the conversation summary, so what we've already the conversation we really have with the large language model, we're going to try and retain as much of that context as possible and feed that back in, just so that it knows what we were talking about. It's not a conversation that's completely out the blue. We've also got presence and frequency penalty there, so that all comes from the prompt. And we go down and when we've completed that interaction, we actually store that response in a row and relate it back to the request. Now, as we go through this, obviously these conversations could potentially get quite big, and large language models have a limitation on the amount of tokens that you can send as part of the conversation. So one thing we do before we start to like interact with OpenAI is that we do some quick maths, as I like to call it. It's not particularly accurate, and I would really like to find a better way of estimating what tokens are going to be used as part of a request. But we do like a ballpark figure, and if we think the request is going to breach the token limit, we actually then get another large language model. So we primarily use GPT-4 to do this, to actually summarize the conversation down as much as possible, so that we try and retain that conversation but with fewer words, and then that will help us to overcome that sort of limitation. And what we do is that we actually just give it it's a very basic prompt here actually, but we asked it to keep key information, so like the business type and the business problem trying to be solved. And we also try and retain diagrams if they're part of the conversation, because that could help the large language model to determine what we're actually talking about when it goes on to do other things. So what we're going to see here, hopefully, if it all works, if it has worked, John, I've probably spoken long enough for this process to complete, is that we have a list of responses now that are being rendered on the model-driven app form through some customization and a web resource HTML page.
Yeah, it's quite interesting what it's come up with, I think.
Oh, okay.
I quite like the user stories and the personas: a devout Muslim in different time zones, and a reflective Muslim.
Okay.
So yeah, I like how it's kind of split those up, which is quite cool. And then we've got a user journey as well, which is, yeah, I mean, it is pretty basic, but it's kind of it's a starting point, right?
And so what we've done here is we've gone from having a single flow that generates a ERD schema to now actually we've got something more programmable. So we can change what this does, right? We can have it just do user stories if we want to, or we could do focus on user journeys, or we could do something completely different. It's trying to make tool reusable for different purposes, and not just as database consultants. And that's really like where the prompt orchestration came from, is that we want it to be able to do more, and we would also really, our vision for this is that if people do use it, they can actually start to write their own prompts. And actually, the next step is really like, what's the best way for us to share those like cluster of prompts out as a function, which is, in our case, is generate baseline solution for a business, but it could be something else as well. So Parvez, what do you think of the response there?
It's pretty good actually. I'm quite impressed. Yeah, I'd like to. I'd probably give it just reflecting on what it's come back with. I'd probably give it a bit more information to see if it can track additional data around, kind of prayer times through the day and stuff like this as well. So that would enhance a few features. But yeah, it's pretty cool as a starting point, definitely.
And I think that's key. What you said there is like starting point, and that's really like our intention for this is that this is like your initial conversation with a customer. If you're looking at a solution, this isn't like, this isn't definitely what you're going to build, and this is always going to be accurate. We always check responses with large language models. Maybe, as you said, we could probably give this more context, and it could give us something that's more complete. But it's a really good starter for 10 if you don't really understand like the water utility industry, as an example, to like just get that initial understanding. And actually, you've got an understanding, because if you go to the very top, we get that domain specific information. I don't know how much it's generated for this example, but ones we've done in the past, it will actually start to map out different business processes that you could tackle as part of an ERD solution, and then one of those it generally chooses and then does the whole ERD to cover that.
Yeah, so up at the
Yeah, I think-
top there, it's kind of thinking of some different ideas like user
Yeah.
registration, fasting tracker, progress
Yeah,
tracking.
100%.
So
Just yeah, just reading that through, it's referring to like the pre-fast meal and the kind of the post-fast meal and things like that as well. So that's pretty good actually. It's going a bit further than what I just asked for, so that's pretty good. Would
Yeah.
it go even further and
And I
even
think-
create the schema and data model and stuff like that in Dataverse?
Well, I mean, this is something we've pondered, haven't we, John? Is like how far do we go? Like,
Yeah.
You can essentially have an approvals process, because what you probably wouldn't want to do is like assume that the first response is always going to be correct, and with prompting we always want to iterate on that. That request has cost us 32 pence to actually do so, and that's with all the calls that we've made to OpenAI, right? So all of those like summarizing the rules, that's summarizing the conversation if we think it's going to go over the token limit.
Very good.
I've lost my train of thought there, but yeah, I mean, rather than just assuming
about-
that what comes out is going to be correct, maybe there's a way that we actually say, okay, this is correct. If it's in this particular scenario, create that, start to create the XML to build the tables or something like that. I guess that's probably going to be like the next phase of it. But then how do we also make it more like a general purpose tool as well?
Yeah.
But we could just ask it, John, couldn't we? I suppose
We could, yeah. So thank you everyone for listening, and thanks Parvez. Cheers for the example. I really appreciate that. I wonder if anyone else has any questions. Otherwise, we can hand back to Matt.
Yeah, I mean, I'll probably just before any questions, I'll probably just finish off by saying that you can find Just Ask It on LinkedIn, GitHub, and on various videos on YouTube. If you can hear any music today, it was probably provided by Ken Like Fit. This has been the Just Ask It demo, and we've been Jon Russell. Say goodbye, John.
Goodbye.
The D365 Power Platform User Group, Virtual User Group. Say goodbye, everyone. And I've been Mike Gowland, and we'll see you in the next session.
Cheers, guys.
Had to do it.
He loves it. He loves it. He loves it.
I love it.
On brand. Yes. If anyone's got any questions, please come off mute and have a chat. No problem.
Not a
Nathan,
question.
or maybe you're just waving.
Not a question for anybody.
Sorry, Chris.
I just think this is awesome because I've been playing around with ChatGPT a while back just to get it to write user stories, but you've taken it way past that. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Nice. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, by all means, just get on the GitHub. There's a unmanaged solution in there, and basically what you need is an OpenAI API key. And once you've got that,
we've also included the data set in the GitHub as well, John, haven't we? That contains the prompts that we've used, so you should be able to use those.
And the rules and stuff as well. So if you need those, Alex, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks. My question is, so have you used this from an actual customer? So taking information from maybe a 1 hour, 2 hour initial discussion, or is this before that stage?
So I think the intention for this is that we've sort of thought of doing this before that stage, just to really sort of arm us with some knowledge of a industry, specific domain industry, but there's no reason why we can't do that afterwards. And in fact, me and John helped run a hackathon a little while ago, where customers bought their own ideas. We obviously helped them to develop those as part of the hack, but just as a bit of curiosity, really, me and John fed our team's ideas into Just Ask It, and it came up with very similar results to what our teams ultimately built.
Yeah.
So I guess really there's no like specific answer as to when we would use this, but it could be used pre-meeting, it could be used during, just to sort of like show what could be built to a customer. So there's different use cases, I guess, is the answer, and probably that typical like it depends.
Cool, thanks.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers. Anyone else got any questions before we hand back to Matt? No? Okay. Thank you very much, everyone. I really appreciate you taking the time. And
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Mike. That was a real eye-opener, I think, for a lot of people. I think we're trying to talk a lot about like LLMs and GPT models and frameworks and things like that. But actually seeing something properly solutionized like that is like the real key to unlocking a lot of these things. It's all great theory, but once you see it like properly in action, it's great.
Yeah, and you know what? When I started to get into AI as well, I had this real, I call it the Netflix problem. You've got this tool that's really powerful and can do so much, but just like with Netflix and the massive library it has, you don't really know what you want to watch, right? Because you've got so much choice and there's so much you could do. And I think for me, like when I started looking at large language models in anger, which was obviously after playing around with ChatGPT for a little bit and then getting bored and then actually coming back to it and looking at really how it works. It was like, what are the use cases? And that's probably where I struggled first. And I think this is probably like the first use case that I know obviously me and John came up with it together, but a use case that could actually have some benefit. That I could sort of like think up myself, but I think just being able to see something like that is, if it inspires people to build other things as well, then that's amazing. And in fact, the stuff with Mermaid, it's not AI related, but somebody did a blog post a few weeks ago on using those diagrams as part of a approvals Power Automate flow. I thought that was incredible just to see that. So.
Yeah, no, it was really great, and I think so. I'm on the AI builder train at the moment, trying to like work with organizations to get that in. And as soon as like ChatGPT came out, it was there like, oh, we don't need AI builder anymore. I was like, no, you do, because because what it does is it solves the Netflix problem for you. Because you're no longer having to think about all these scenarios. You're giving these individual models and told, hey, this is document processing, this is sentiment analysis, this is this. And if you still want those large language models, you can connect them into your Copilot Studio and AI Builder at the same time. You get the best of both worlds, but you need that on-ramp. And I think, like, for me, AI Builder for a lot of organizations is a great on-ramp. They want the large language models, they want that more complexity, but a lot of the time they don't know why. They see it in the news, that's the hot flashy topic, let's do it.
And I think Just Ask It is really starting on what we know, and what we need to help, what we're trying to augment and help ourselves with. And that's how we came together quite quickly, because it was all about trying to improve those initial conversations with clients. Basically, that's what it's really about.
The first thing I tell people when they start out in Power Apps and things like that is like, go build an app for yourself. Like, go build something for you, because you'll find the problems, you'll be able to understand the problems, understand the solution, and overcome it. So yeah, this is a great place to start, and I really like this presentation. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Matt.
Unless there's any other questions, I want to say a big thank you to all our speakers, to Mike, to John, to Mike too, the bad Mike, who's I think left. Had to decorate a cake. It was a fantastic evening. Thank you everyone for joining tonight. Thanks to our sponsors. Thanks to my other colleagues in our committee. And unless you guys want to just stay around and shoot the breeze, you're all free to go enjoy the rest of your evening. So thank you, everyone. And yeah, I'll see you maybe in a few months in the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you very much.